The sound of boots hitting the wooden boardwalk echoed through the empty street as Violet Sullivan ran for her life. Dawn was barely breaking over Las Animas, Colorado, casting long shadows that she desperately tried to use for cover. Her heart pounded against her ribs, each breath burning in her lungs as she glanced over her shoulder at the wanted poster that had been nailed to every post in town, her face staring back with the words "Wanted, Dead or Alive" printed beneath in bold letters. The year was 1878, and Violet Sullivan had just become the most hunted woman in Colorado territory. She ducked into an alley between the general store and the saloon, pressing her back against the rough wooden wall as she tried to catch her breath. Her long auburn hair was falling loose from its pins, and her green dress was mudded at the hem from her desperate flight out of town last night. The bank robbery she was accused of had left 2 men dead, including the bank manager, but Violet knew she was innocent. She had been nowhere near the bank when the shooting started, not that it mattered now. Someone had pointed the finger at her, and in a frontier town like Las Animas, accusations were as good as proof when it came to crimes this serious. The sound of horses approaching sent a chill down her spine. Cautiously, she peered around the corner to see a man dismounting in front of the sheriff's office. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in dark clothing with a long duster that nearly touched the ground. The rising sun glinted off the badge pinned to his vest, not a sheriff's star, but something else. A bounty hunter's badge. Violet pulled back, her mouth dry with fear. They'd sent for a bounty hunter already. The reward must be substantial if they weren't leaving it to the local law. She needed to get out of town, and fast. But with only the clothes on her back and a few dollars to her name, her options were limited. She couldn't go back to her small room above the seamstress shop where she worked. They'd look for her there first. She needed a horse, supplies, and a place to hide until she could figure out how to clear her name. As quietly as possible, she made her way behind the buildings, keeping to the shadows until she reached the livery stable at the edge of town. If she could just borrow a horse, steal it. If she had to, she could be miles away before anyone realized she was gone. The stable was quiet this early in the morning. Violet slipped inside, the familiar smell of hay and horses greeting her. She moved slowly past the stalls, looking for a mount that seemed calm and strong. "I wouldn't take that one if I were you. Throws everyone but me." The deep voice from behind her made Violet jump and spin around, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. A man stood leaning against one of the stall doors, arms crossed over his chest. He wasn't particularly tall, but there was a quiet strength in his stance that made him imposing nonetheless. His face was partially shadowed by his wide-brimmed hat, but she could see he had a strong jaw darkened by stubble and eyes that watched her with curious intensity. I was just looking," Violet stammered, backing away and searching frantically for an escape route. "At Diablo here." The man nodded toward the black stallion in the stall beside him. "With a saddlebag already in your hand, seems like more than looking to me." His voice held no accusation, just a calm observation that somehow made it worse. "Please," Violet whispered, the fight suddenly draining out of her. "I need to leave town. They think There's been a mistake." The man pushed his hat back slightly, revealing a face younger than she'd first thought, probably not more than 30. His eyes were a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin. "You're Violet Sullivan," he said matter-of-factly. "The woman they're saying robbed the bank yesterday." Her stomach dropped. "I didn't do it," she said, lifting her chin despite her fear. "I was at the seamstress shop all afternoon. Mrs. Hollister can vouch for me, but they won't listen." The man studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he straightened up and walked toward her. Violet tensed, ready to bolt, but he stopped a respectful distance away. "Name's Kieran Paine," he said. "I run cattle on the North Range. Was in town to sell some stock yesterday." He paused, seeming to consider his words carefully. "I saw you when the shooting started. You were nowhere near that bank." Hope flared in Violet's chest. "You did, you'll tell them." A grim smile touched his lips. "Already tried. Sheriff Wilkins isn't exactly known for his fair-mindedness." "Someone's determined to pin this on you, Miss Sullivan." "But why? I've only been in Las Animas for 6 months. I barely know anyone." Kieran shrugged. "That might be why. Stranger in town, no family to speak for you." He glanced toward the stable door. "That bounty hunter that just rode in his bad news. Harlan Cole, known for bringing folks in dead more often than alive." Violet's legs nearly gave out beneath her. "What am I going to do?" Kieran Paine looked at her for a long moment, then seemed to come to a decision. "You can ride." She nodded. "My father taught me." "Good." He moved past her to a stall holding a chestnut mare. "Penny here is gentle but fast. She'll get you to my ranch if you follow the north trail out of town." He quickly began saddling the horse. "It's about 15 miles. Keep the mountains to your right and you'll see the fence line eventually. Big white house with a red barn behind it. Can't miss it. Your ranch." "But why would you?" "Because I know what it's like to be accused of something you didn't do," he said simply, tightening the cinch. "And I don't much care for Harlan Cole or men like him." Violet watched him prepare the horse, her mind racing. Could she trust this stranger? What choice did she have? "My foreman, Pablo, will be there. Tell him I sent you and to keep you out of sight until I get back." "When will that be?" "By nightfall. I've got some business to finish in town." He handed her the reins. "There's a canteen and some jerky in the saddlebag. Should tide you over." Violet hesitated, then took the reins. "I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Paine." "Thank me by staying alive and out of Cole's hands." "And it's Kieran." He helped her mount, his hands strong and steady as he gave her a boost into the saddle. "Stick to the creek bed for the first few miles. It'll hide your tracks if Cole decides to follow." She nodded, settling into the saddle and gathering the reins. "Why are you helping me?" "You don't even know me." For the first time, a genuine smile crossed his face, transforming his features. "Let's just say I've got a feeling about you, Miss Sullivan, and I've learned to trust my feelings." With that, he led the horse to the back door of the stable and peered out cautiously. "Coast is clear. Ride hard for the first mile, then ease up so Penny doesn't tire too quickly." Violet looked down at him, memorizing his face in case this was some trick. But all she saw was honest concern in his eyes. "Thank you, Kieran," she said softly. "I won't forget this." He stepped back, giving the mare a gentle slap on the flank. "Go on now. And Miss Sullivan, be careful." Violet urged the horse forward and didn't look back as she rode out of Las Animas, the rising sun at her back and an uncertain future ahead. Kieran Paine watched until she disappeared from sight, then adjusted his hat and made his way back to the main street. The bounty hunter was still at the sheriff's office, which gave Kieran time to prepare. He wasn't sure why he'd decided to help Violet Sullivan, a woman he knew only by sight, but something about the determination in her eyes and the obvious injustice of her situation had stirred something in him. Besides, he'd been in town yesterday afternoon and had seen her working in the seamstress shop window just before the shots rang out from the bank. She couldn't have been in 2 places at once. The question was, who wanted her blamed badly enough to lie about it? Kieran made his way to the saloon, where morning business was just getting underway. A few early drinkers nursed glasses at scattered tables, while a tired-looking woman swept the floor. "Morning, Kate," he greeted the barmaid, who brightened at the sight of him. "Kieran Paine, as I live and breathe. What brings you to town so early?" She leaned on the bar, showing a generous amount of cleavage that Kieran politely ignored, looking for information. "You hear about the bank robbery yesterday?" Kate rolled her eyes. "Who hasn't?" "2 men dead, including old man Carver from the bank. They're saying that Sullivan girl did it." "And what do you think?" Kate raised an eyebrow. "Since when do you care what I think?" "Since you see and hear more than most folks in this town," Kieran replied, sliding a silver dollar across the bar. "Did you see her around the time of the robbery?" Kate pocketed the coin smoothly. "Can't say I did, but I did see something interesting. That new fella, the one who's been hanging around the mayor's office. He was mighty quick to point the finger at her, almost like he was waiting for something to happen." Kieran frowned. "Westcott, the mining company man. That's the one. Been here about a month, staying in the hotel. Real fancy suit, talks like he's from back east." Kate leaned closer. "Word is he's buying up property for some big mining operation. Mayor's all excited about it." "What would he have against Violet Sullivan?" Kate shrugged. "Don't know, but he was mighty insistent that she be found right away. Offered to pay for the bounty hunter himself." That was interesting. Kieran had never spoken to Westcott, but he'd seen him around town, a well-dressed man with cold eyes who seemed to look through people rather than at them. "Thanks, Kate. That's helpful." "You be careful, Kieran," she warned, her expression serious. "There's something not right about all this. Sheriff's too eager to please the mayor, and the mayor's too eager to please Westcott." Kieran nodded and headed back out to the street just as the sheriff's office door opened. Harlan Cole stepped out, followed by Sheriff Wilkins. Cole was as intimidating as his reputation suggested, tall and lean, with a weather-beaten face and eyes like chips of ice. A long scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, giving his face a perpetually twisted expression. His black duster hung open, revealing an impressive array of weapons strapped to his body. Kieran crossed the street casually, timing his approach to intercept them. "Morning, Sheriff," he greeted, tipping his hat. "Heard there was some excitement yesterday while I was at the cattle auction." Sheriff Wilkins was a small man with an oversized mustache that seemed to compensate for his lack of physical presence. He narrowed his eyes at Kieran. "Paine, thought you'd have headed back to your ranch by now." "Had some business to finish up," Kieran replied easily. "This about the bank robbery?" Cole studied Kieran with those cold eyes. "You know something about it, Cowboy?" Kieran met his gaze steadily. "Just curious. Heard they're blaming that seamstress girl Sullivan, is it? Seems odd. She doesn't strike me as the bank robbing type." "Witnesses saw her," the sheriff said firmly. "Which witnesses?" Kieran asked. "That's official business," Wilkins snapped. "Mr. Cole here is going to bring her in, and then we'll have a proper trial." Cole's thin lips curved in what might have been a smile. "If she's still breathing when I find her." "Now hold on," Kieran said, his voice hardening slightly. "The poster says dead or alive, but surely the town wants justice, not a corpse." "Justice is what we'll get," Cole replied. "One way or another." Kieran fought to keep his expression neutral. "Well, good luck finding her. I imagine she's long gone by now." "We'll see," Cole said. "Someone always knows something. Someone always talks." His eyes narrowed slightly. "You seem mighty concerned about a woman you don't know, Mr. Paine. Kieran Paine. I own the Big K Ranch north of town. And I'm concerned about justice. This town's got a habit of hanging first and asking questions later." The sheriff bristled. "Now see here, Paine, actually," Kieran interrupted, an idea forming. "Now that I think about it, I did see Miss Sullivan yesterday afternoon." Both men's attention sharpened. "Where?" Cole demanded. Kieran shrugged casually. "She was with me." A stunned silence followed his words. "What do you mean, with you?" the sheriff finally asked. "I mean she was at my hotel room from about 2 o'clock until after 5, Kieran said smoothly. We had a private arrangement. The sheriff's face reddened. You expect me to believe you were with her when the bank was being robbed? Believe what you want, Kieran replied. But Miss Sullivan was with me at the Frontier Hotel, room 12. You can ask the desk clerk if you don't believe me. He saw her come up. This was a gamble. Kieran had indeed rented a room at the Frontier yesterday, intending to stay the night after selling his cattle. The desk clerk had seen him go up alone around noon, but hadn't seen him leave and return several times during the day to check on negotiations at the stockyard. With luck, the clerk wouldn't remember exactly who had come and gone. Cole's eyes had narrowed to slits. You willing to swear to that in court? Absolutely, Kieran said without hesitation. Miss Sullivan is innocent of this crime because she was with me when it happened. Unless you're suggesting we robbed the bank together, the sheriff sputtered. Now wait just a minute. What's your interest in this, Paine? Cole cut in, his voice dangerously soft. Why stick your neck out for a woman like that? Kieran kept his face impassive. I don't like seeing innocent people hunted down. Especially not by men who seem more interested in the bounty than the truth. Cole's hand drifted toward his gun, but the sheriff stepped between them. That's enough. Paine, I want a formal statement from you. Cole, hold off on your hunt until we sort this out. He didn't look happy about the delay. Mayor Thornton will want to hear about this. Kieran nodded. I'll be around all day. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some business at the Mercantile. He walked away, feeling Cole's eyes boring into his back. The lie had bought Violet some time, but it had also put a target on his own back. If Cole or the sheriff checked too closely with the hotel clerk, the story might fall apart. And Kieran still didn't know why someone wanted to frame Violet Sullivan for murder and robbery. But he intended to find out. Violet Sullivan rode hard along the creek bed, just as Kieran had instructed. The mare beneath her was sure-footed and steady, picking her way through the rocky terrain with confidence. After the first mile, Violet slowed the horse to a more sustainable pace, though every instinct screamed at her to keep running. Her mind raced with questions. Why had Kieran Paine helped her? What would happen when the bounty hunter discovered she was gone? And most importantly, who had framed her for the bank robbery? The only person she could think of who might have a grudge against her was Edward Westcott, the mining company representative, who had made unwelcome advances toward her several times since arriving in Los Animas. She had firmly rebuffed him each time, the last occasion being quite public when he'd cornered her outside the seamstress shop. Could a wounded ego drive a man to such extremes? After about 2 hours of riding, the creek bed began to dry up, forcing Violet to move onto more open ground. She kept the mountains to her right as Kieran had said, scanning the horizon for any sign of pursuit. The vast Colorado landscape stretched out around her, rolling hills giving way to flat plains, dotted with scrubby bushes and the occasional stand of cottonwoods. In another situation, she might have found the wild beauty breathtaking. The sun climbed higher, beating down mercilessly. Violet had worn only a light shawl over her dress when she fled her room the previous night, and now she was grateful for the wide-brimmed hat she'd found tied to the saddle. She pulled it low over her face, both for protection from the sun and in case anyone should see her from a distance. By midday, fatigue was setting in. Violet had never ridden this far in one stretch, and every muscle protested the continued exertion. She allowed herself a short rest in the shade of a small grove of trees, letting the mare drink from a shallow pool while she took careful sips from the canteen Kieran had provided. "Not much farther, Penny," she murmured to the horse, stroking its neck. "At least, I hope not." As the afternoon wore on, Violet began to see signs of habitation fences appeared in the distance. and occasionally she spotted cattle grazing on the hillsides. Finally, just as the sun was beginning its descent in the western sky, she crested a small rise and saw the Big K Ranch spread out below her. It was larger than she'd expected. A sprawling white two-story house stood surrounded by several outbuildings, including the red barn Kieran had mentioned. A bunkhouse sat off to one side, and corrals and pens were visible beyond. Several cowboys moved about the property, tending to end-of-day chores. Violet hesitated. What if this was a trap? What if Kieran Paine had sent her here to be captured? But the alternative, turning back toward Las Animas and certain arrest, was unthinkable. Taking a deep breath, she urged Penny forward down the slope toward the ranch. She had barely reached the main gate when a man on horseback rode out to meet her. He was Mexican, perhaps in his 40s, with a weather-beaten face and watchful eyes. "Can I help you, señorita?" he asked cautiously. Violet straightened in the saddle. "Are you Pablo? Kieran Paine sent me. He said you'd be expecting me." The man's expression remained guarded. "I was not expecting anyone." Her heart sank. "Please, I need to speak with you. It's important. Kieran sent me here for safety." Pablo studied her for a long moment, then recognition flickered in his eyes. "You are the woman from town, the one they say robbed the bank." "I didn't do it," Violet said firmly. "I was framed. Kieran believes me. He said he'd be back by nightfall." Pablo's posture relaxed slightly. "If Kieran sent you, then you are welcome. Come, let's get you inside before someone sees you from the road." He led her to the barn first, where they unsaddled Penny and gave her water and feed. Then Pablo escorted Violet to the main house, glancing around to ensure none of the ranch hands were paying too much attention. The interior of Kieran's home surprised Violet. Rather than the sparse bachelor quarters she had expected, the house was comfortably and tastefully furnished. Solid, well-made furniture, colorful rugs on the floors, and bookshelves filled with volumes suggested a man of education and means. "Kieran's sister visits sometimes," Pablo explained, seeing her surprise. "She made it more, how do you say, civilized." "It's lovely," Violet said honestly. "Come, I will show you where you can rest." Pablo led her upstairs to a small but comfortable guest room. "There is water for washing," he said, pointing to a pitcher and basin on a side table. "And I will bring you food soon. You are safe here, señorita. No one will look for you at the Big K." Once alone, Violet sank onto the bed, the events of the past 24 hours crashing down on her. She'd been accused of murder, had fled her home, and was now hiding on the ranch of a man she barely knew. Tears welled up unexpectedly, and she allowed herself a moment of weakness, burying her face in her hands as the sobs came. When she had composed herself, Violet used the water to wash away the dust of the trail and the tears from her face. Her dress was wrinkled and dirty, but there was nothing to be done about that. She tidied her hair as best she could using a small mirror on the wall, then sat by the window, watching the ranch hands finish their day's work as the sun began to set. Who was Kieran Paine, this rancher who had risked himself to help a woman he didn't know? And would he return as promised, or had he simply gotten her out of town to protect her, with no intention of becoming further involved? As darkness fell, Violet's questions remained unanswered, and anxiety gnawed at her. If Kieran didn't return, what would she do next? Back in Las Animas, Kieran was facing problems of his own. After leaving the sheriff and Cole, he'd gone straight to the Frontier Hotel to speak with the desk clerk, a young man named Timothy whom Kieran knew slightly. "Need a favor, Tim," Kieran had said quietly, sliding a gold coin across the counter. "If anyone asks, you saw a young woman, auburn hair, green dress, coming to my room yesterday afternoon, around 2 o'clock. Timothy's eyes had widened. You mean Miss Sullivan? The one they're saying robbed the bank. That's the one. And she didn't rob any bank. Timothy had looked nervous. I don't know, Mr. Paine, lying to the sheriff. It's not a lie if you just can't remember clearly, Kieran had suggested. Maybe you saw a woman go up, maybe you didn't. Memory's a funny thing. In the end, Timothy had pocketed the coin with a reluctant nod. But Kieran wasn't confident the young man would hold up under serious questioning. Now, as evening approached, Kieran sat in the back corner of the saloon, nursing a whiskey and observing. Mayor Thornton had arrived at the sheriff's office an hour ago, accompanied by Edward Westcott. They'd been closeted inside ever since, and Kieran was waiting to see what came of their meeting. The saloon doors swung open, and Harlan Cole entered, his cold eyes scanning the room until they landed on Kieran. Without hesitation, the bounty hunter made his way to Kieran's table and sat down uninvited. "Mr. Paine," he said, his voice as dry as desert sand. "I've been looking into your story." Kieran took a slow sip of his whiskey. And I find it interesting that a respectable rancher like yourself would be entertaining a seamstress in the middle of the day." Cole's scarred face twisted into what might have been a smile. "Especially one he supposedly barely knows." "My personal affairs are my business," Kieran replied evenly. "The point is, Miss Sullivan was with me when the bank was robbed. She's innocent." Cole leaned forward slightly. "The desk clerk seemed uncertain about seeing her enter your room." "Very uncertain, damn." Timothy had cracked faster than Kieran had expected. He's a busy man. Doesn't see everyone who comes and goes. Indeed. Cole's eyes never left Kieran's face. "And the maid who cleaned your room this morning says there was no sign a woman had been there. No hairpins. No perfume smell, nothing feminine at all," Kieran shrugged. "Miss Sullivan is a neat person." Cole's expression hardened. "You're lying, Paine. The question is why? What's your interest in this woman? I told you, she's innocent." "Even if that's true, and I'm not saying it is, why do you care?" "What is she to you?" Kieran set his glass down carefully. "I don't like seeing innocent people hunted down for something they didn't do. It's happened before in this town." A flash of understanding crossed Cole's face. "Ah, this is personal for you, isn't it? Someone you knew got wrongly accused once." Kieran didn't answer, but his jaw tightened slightly. Cole nodded slowly. "I see. Well, Mr. Paine, your noble intentions are admirable, but they won't stop me from doing my job. The Sullivan woman is wanted for murder and robbery, and I intend to bring her in." "Dead or alive?" Kieran asked quietly. Cole's smile was cold. "That depends entirely on her, and on whether anyone is foolish enough to stand in my way." He stood up. "I'll be leaving at first light to track her. If you were a true gentleman, you'd tell me where she's gone and save us all a lot of trouble." "I've told you all I know," Kieran said. "She was with me yesterday afternoon. Beyond that, I can't help you." Cole studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. "We'll see. Good evening, Mr. Paine." After the bounty hunter left, Kieran finished his whiskey in one swallow. Cole clearly didn't believe him, which meant Violet was still in danger. He needed to get back to the ranch as quickly as possible. As he stood to leave, the saloon doors swung open again, and Edward Westcott entered, flanked by two men Kieran didn't recognize. Unlike Cole, who exuded natural menace, Westcott's danger was more refined, a cold calculation behind his polished appearance. He was perhaps 40, with pale blue eyes and carefully groomed dark hair and mustache. His expensive suit marked him as an outsider in the rough frontier town. Westcott spotted Kieran and changed direction, heading straight for him. Kieran stayed where he was, curious to hear what the man had to say. "Mr. Paine, I presume?" Westcott's voice carried the refined tones of an Eastern education. I'm Edward Westcott. I believe we have a mutual acquaintance." "Is that so?" "Indeed, Miss Violet Sullivan." Westcott's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I understand you're claiming she was with you during yesterday's unfortunate incident at the bank." "It's not a claim, it's the truth." Westcott chuckled. "Come now, Mr. Paine, we're both men of the world. I understand the desire to protect a beautiful woman, but Miss Sullivan is dangerous. She's not what she seems." "And what does she seem to you, Mr. Westcott? An innocent seamstress?" Westcott shook his head. "Hardly. The woman has a past, Mr. Paine." "Did she tell you she came to Las Animas directly from Denver, where she was implicated in another theft? Or that before that, she lived in Pueblo under a different name entirely?" This was news to Kieran, but he kept his expression neutral. "Sounds like you've taken quite an interest in Miss Sullivan." "Let's just say I make it my business to know who I'm dealing with," Westcott replied. "My company has significant investments in this region. We can't afford disruptions or complications." "What kind of complications would a seamstress cause for a mining company?" Kieran asked pointedly. Westcott's smile tightened. "I'm merely concerned about the town's welfare. A murderer on the loose is bad for everyone. Except she didn't do it. Because she was with you." Westcott raised an eyebrow. A convenient alibi from a man who, by all accounts, had never spoken to her before today. "Why would you lie for her, Mr. Paine? Why would you be so eager to see her hang?" Kieran countered. For a moment, Westcott's composed facade cracked, revealing something ugly beneath. Then the mask was back in place. "I merely want justice served, as should we all." He straightened his jacket. "I'd reconsider your position if I were you, Mr. Paine. Las Animas is changing. Progress is coming. It would be a shame if your ranch were to find itself obsolete in the new order of things." The threat was thinly veiled, but Kieran merely smiled. "My family has been on that land for 30 years, Mr. Westcott. We've weathered worse than mining company men with fancy suits." Westcott's expression hardened. "We'll see. Good evening, Mr. Paine." As Westcott walked away, Kieran felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. There was more at stake here than a simple bank robbery. The question was, what did Violet Sullivan know that made her so dangerous to Edward Westcott? Kieran didn't intend to wait around to find out. He left the saloon and headed straight for the livery stable. Within 15 minutes, he was riding out of Las Animas, pushing his horse harder than he normally would. He needed to reach the Big K before Cole started tracking Violet at dawn, and he needed to hear the truth from Violet herself. Night had fully fallen by the time Kieran arrived at his ranch. The house was mostly dark, with only a few lamps burning in the downstairs windows. As he approached, he saw Pablo step out onto the porch, rifle in hand. "It's me," Kieran called softly, dismounting at the hitching post. Pablo lowered the rifle. "Gracias a Dios. I was beginning to worry." "She made it then?" Kieran asked, leading his horse toward the barn. She arrived this afternoon. I put her in the blue room." Pablo fell into step beside him. "She is frightened, Kieran, and exhausted." "Is she asleep?" "No, she insisted on waiting for you." Kieran nodded, handing his horse over to Pablo. "Take care of Diablo for me. I'll go talk to her." Inside the house, Kieran found Violet in the kitchen, sitting at the large wooden table with a cup of tea in front of her. She looked up when he entered, relief washing over her face. "You came back," she said softly. "I said I would." He removed his hat and hung it on a peg by the door. "Are you all right?" "Yes, thanks to you." She studied his face. "But something's wrong. I can see it." Kieran pulled out a chair across from her and sat down. "Cole didn't believe my story about you being with me. He'll start tracking you at dawn." Fear flickered in her eyes. "How long before he finds the ranch?" "A day, maybe 2 if we're lucky. He's good at what he does." Kieran leaned forward. But that's not all. I had a conversation with Edward Westcott this evening. Violet tensed at the name, her fingers tightening around her teacup. What did he want? To warn me away from helping you. Kieran watched her carefully. He said some interesting things about you, Violet. Said you came here from Denver where you were involved in a theft. Said you lived in Pueblo before that under a different name. Color drained from Violet's face. She set the teacup down with a shaky hand. And you believe him? I'm giving you the chance to tell me yourself, Kieran replied evenly. If I'm risking my life and my ranch for you, I think I deserve the truth. For a long moment, Violet was silent, her eyes on the table. When she finally looked up, there was a mixture of fear and defiance in her gaze. My real name is Violet Sullivan, she began. That much is true. I did live in Denver before coming to Las Animas and in Pueblo before that, but I wasn't involved in any theft. Then what? She took a deep breath. In Pueblo, I worked as a teacher. I was engaged to be married to a man named Charles Harrington. He was a banker, respectable, wealthy, well-connected. Her voice hardened slightly. And cruel. I didn't see it at first, but as the wedding approached, he became controlling, possessive. What happened? I tried to break off the engagement. He didn't take it well, threatened me, said he'd ruin me if I left him. She rubbed her arms as if suddenly cold. One night he came to my home drunk. He was angry, violent. I defended myself with a fire poker. I didn't mean to hurt him badly, but he fell and hit his head. There was so much blood. Kieran waited silently for her to continue. He lived, Violet said, but his family was powerful in Pueblo. They claimed I tried to kill him for his money. No one would believe my side of the story. So I fled to Denver. And then what? I worked in a dress shop in Denver for almost a year. I was careful, kept to myself. But then one day, Charles's cousin came into the shop. He recognized me. She shook her head. The next day, a valuable brooch went missing and the shop owner accused me of stealing it. I knew it was Charles's family behind it. They'd found me and were making good on their threat to ruin me. So you ran again, to Las Animas. She nodded. I thought I'd gone far enough this time. Changed enough details about my past. But then Westcott arrived in town. You know him from before. He was Charles's business associate in Pueblo. He recognized me almost immediately. Her hands clenched into fists. He's been pursuing me since he arrived. Said if I wouldn't be his willingly, he'd make sure I had no choice. Understanding dawned on Kieran. So the bank robbery was a way to trap me, Violet finished. Either I'd hang for it or I'd be forced to turn to him for protection. Kieran sat back, considering her story. It explained Westcott's interest and the elaborate frame-up. Do you have any proof of any of this? Violet shook her head. Just my word. I know how it sounds. Actually, Kieran said, it sounds exactly like something a man like Westcott would do. He'd seen enough of the man to recognize the cold calculation behind his polished exterior. But it doesn't solve our immediate problem. Cole will be on your trail by morning and he won't stop until he finds you. What are we going to do? Kieran stood up, pacing the kitchen as he thought. We need evidence that Westcott was behind the robbery, something to clear your name. But how? All the witnesses will say they saw me. Witnesses can be paid to lie, Kieran pointed out, but money leaves a trail. If Westcott hired someone to rob that bank and frame you, there must be a connection we can find. Even if there is, how do we find it before Cole finds me? Kieran stopped pacing, a plan forming in his mind. We need to separate. I'll go back to town tomorrow, start asking questions. You'll stay here, but not in the house. Pablo will take you to the line shack in the north pasture. It's isolated and Cole is less likely to look there. You'd go back, after standing up for me. Westcott will be suspicious. Let him be, Kieran said grimly. I need to be in town to find the evidence, and to keep an eye on Cole's movements." Violet stood up, moving closer to him. In the lamplight, her auburn hair glowed like fire, and her green eyes held a mixture of fear and determination that stirred something in Kieran's chest. "Why are you doing all this for me?" she asked softly. "You barely know me." It was a question Kieran had been asking himself since that morning in the stable. Why risk everything for a woman he'd only seen in passing before today? The answer came to him with surprising clarity. "Because I know what it's like to be powerless against men with money and influence," he said. 10 years ago, my father was accused of stealing cattle from a wealthy rancher named Blackburn. The evidence was flimsy, but Blackburn had the sheriff and judge in his pocket. My father was innocent, but they hung him anyway. Violet's eyes widened. "Kieran, I'm so sorry." After that, I promised myself I'd never stand by while an innocent person was railroaded. His jaw tightened. "And I won't start now." Without warning, Violet stepped forward and placed her hand on his arm. The touch was light, but Kieran felt it like a brand through his shirt sleeve. "Thank you," she said simply. "I won't forget this." For a moment they stood close, the kitchen suddenly seeming smaller. Then Kieran stepped back, breaking the spell. "You should get some rest," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "We'll leave for the line shack before dawn." Violet nodded and turned to go, but paused at the door. "Kieran, do you think we can really find evidence against Westcott?" "We have to," he replied. "Otherwise, you'll never be free." After she left, Kieran sat alone in the kitchen for a long time, turning over everything he knew about the situation. His instincts told him Violet was telling the truth, but instincts wouldn't be enough to save her from the noose if Cole brought her in. They needed concrete evidence of Westcott's involvement in the bank robbery, and they had very little time to find it. Dawn was just breaking when Kieran, Pablo, and Violet set out for the line shack. They traveled cross-country, avoiding the main trails, with Kieran leading the way. The line shack was situated in the most remote corner of the Big K, nestled in a small valley that was difficult to spot unless you knew exactly where to look. "It's not much," Kieran said as the small cabin came into view, "but it's solid and dry. There's a spring nearby for water." The shack was indeed modest, a single room with a small porch, built of rough-hewn logs. Inside was a narrow bed, a table with 2 chairs, a small stove, and little else. But it was well maintained and clean, with firewood stacked neatly against one wall and basic supplies in a cupboard. "Pablo will stay with you," Kieran told Violet as they unloaded supplies from their horses. "He's the best shot on the ranch, and he knows these hills better than anyone." Violet nodded, trying to hide her nervousness. "How long will you be gone?" 2 days, maybe 3. "I need to find out who actually robbed that bank and how they're connected to Westcott." Kieran handed her a small revolver from his saddlebag. "Do you know how to use this?" She took it with a steady hand. "My father taught me. I'm a fair shot." "Good. Hopefully you won't need it, but just in case." He turned to Pablo. "If I'm not back in 4 days, or if you see any sign of trouble, take her north into the mountains. My sister's place in Wyoming would be safest." Pablo nodded solemnly. "I will protect her with my life, patron." Kieran clasped the older man's shoulder. "I know you will, but let's hope it doesn't come to that." With the horses unloaded and supplies stored inside, the time had come for Kieran to leave. Pablo tactfully busied himself checking the perimeter, giving them a moment alone. "Be careful in town," Violet said, hugging her arms against the morning chill. "Westcott is dangerous." "So am I when provoked," Kieran replied with a slight smile. Then more seriously, "Stay close to the shack. There's a cellar trapdoor under the rug if you need to hide. It's small, but it might save your life if Cole somehow tracks you here." Violet nodded, then impulsively reached out and took his hand. "Kieran, if something happens, if you can't find the evidence—" "I will," he said firmly. "But if you can't," she persisted, "I want you to know how grateful I am. For believing me, for helping me. Not many would have." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding, a connection that had formed quickly but ran surprisingly deep. Without thinking, Kieran raised his free hand to her cheek, his thumb brushing lightly over her skin. "I'll be back," he promised softly. "And when this is over, when you're safe, maybe we can talk about what comes next." A faint blush colored Violet's cheeks, but she didn't look away. "I'd like that." The moment was interrupted by the sound of Pablo returning. Kieran reluctantly dropped his hand and stepped back. "Remember, 4 days," he said, his voice returning to its normal tone. "If I'm not back by then, head north." With that, he mounted his horse and rode away, forcing himself not to look back. He needed to focus on the task ahead, finding evidence to clear Violet's name and expose Westcott's scheme. The growing feelings he had for her would have to wait. The ride back to Las Animas gave Kieran time to think. His plan was risky return to town as if nothing had happened, and start quietly investigating the bank robbery while keeping tabs on Cole. The bounty hunter would expect him to be hiding Violet, so his reappearance might throw Cole off balance. The trick would be gaining information without revealing his true purpose. By mid-afternoon, Kieran was approaching the outskirts of Las Animas. He slowed his horse to a walk, rehearsing his story one more time. As far as anyone knew, he'd returned to his ranch last night and come back to town on business. Nothing suspicious about that. The town seemed unusually busy for a weekday. As Kieran rode down the main street, he noticed clusters of people engaged in animated conversation, and several unfamiliar horses tied up outside the saloon. Something was happening. He dismounted in front of the general store and tied Diablo to the hitching post. Inside, the store was empty except for the proprietor, Henry Wilson, who looked up in surprise. "Kieran, thought you'd have steered clear of town for a while." "Why's that?" Kieran asked casually, picking up a few items he actually needed. Henry raised his eyebrows. "After that business with the Sullivan woman, word is you provided her an alibi that didn't exactly hold water." "Is that what they're saying?" "That's what Harlan Cole is saying. He rode out at first light, hunting for her." Henry leaned forward conspiratorially. "Between you and me, there's something strange about this whole affair. 2 strangers shot dead in the bank, the only witness being that mining fellow Westcott, and suddenly, a woman who's never caused trouble is the most wanted person in the territory." This was interesting. "Westcott was the witness, the only one willing to testify from what I hear. Said he was walking by and saw her run out the back just after the shots." Henry shook his head. "Convenient, isn't it?" "Very," Kieran agreed, his suspicions about Westcott growing stronger. "What's with all the activity in town today?" "Oh, that's the mining company men. Arrived this morning, engineers, surveyors, the lot. Mayor's beside himself with excitement. Says the mine is going to make Las Animas the biggest town in the territory." "Where are they planning to dig?" "North of town, apparently, right where that creek comes down from the mountains." Henry frowned. "That's close to your place, isn't it?" "About 5 miles as the crow flies," Kieran confirmed, a cold feeling settling in his stomach. If the mining company was planning operations that close to his ranch, they'd need water rights, water that currently belonged to the Big K. Suddenly, Westcott's threat about his ranch becoming obsolete took on new meaning. Strange timing, Kieran mused aloud. Westcott's been talking about this mine for weeks, but the men only arrive right after the bank robbery. Henry shrugged. "Coincidence, I suppose. But Kieran didn't believe in coincidences, especially not when they benefited men like Edward Westcott. He paid for his supplies and headed back out to the street, his mind working through the new information. If Westcott needed Kieran's water rights for his mining operation, and Kieran wasn't willing to sell, creating a distraction like a bank robbery might serve multiple purposes. It would keep the town's attention focused elsewhere while the mining company moved in, and it would eliminate a woman who knew too much about Westcott's past dealings. But Kieran still needed proof, and he knew just where to start looking. The Las Animas Bank was open for business again, though the atmosphere inside was subdued. Bullet holes in the walls had been patched, but were still visible under a hasty coat of paint, and the tellers seemed jumpy. Kieran approached the bank manager's desk, where a nervous-looking young man now sat in place of the deceased Mr. Carver. "Afternoon," Kieran greeted him. "Kieran Paine. I need to access my safety deposit box." "Of course, Mr. Paine. Right this way." The new manager led Kieran to the vault at the back of the bank. As they walked, Kieran glanced around casually. "Terrible business the other day," he remarked. "I knew Mr. Carver slightly. Good man." "Yes, very unfortunate," the manager replied stiffly. "Any idea why they targeted this bank?" "Not much money in a small town like Las Animas." The manager hesitated. "Well, there was a significant deposit made the day before, mining company funds for payroll and equipment purchases. Interesting. How much, if you don't mind my asking?" "I really couldn't say, sir. Bank confidentiality." But the young man's uncomfortable expression told Kieran it was a substantial sum, large enough to be worth killing for. Inside the vault, Kieran pretended to examine papers from his safety deposit box while considering this new information. If the robbery had been about stealing the mining company's money, why frame Violet for it? Unless the robbery itself was a cover for something else entirely. After finishing at the bank, Kieran made his way to the sheriff's office. To his relief, neither Sheriff Wilkins nor Harlan Cole was present. Only Deputy Jenkins sat at the desk, looking bored. "Afternoon, Deputy," Kieran greeted him. "Sheriff around?" "Nope, out with that bounty hunter looking for the Sullivan woman." Jenkins yawned. "Can I help you with something?" "Just wondering if there's been any progress in the bank robbery investigation." Jenkins shrugged. "Not much to investigate. We know who did it." "Do we?" Kieran leaned against the doorframe. "Seems odd, a woman like Violet Sullivan suddenly turning to armed robbery." "What was her motive supposed to be? Money, I reckon. What other motive is there? That's what I'm wondering. She had steady work, a decent place to live. Why risk it all?" Jenkins frowned, seemingly considering this for the first time. "Well, I don't know. That's for the judge to figure out, I suppose." Kieran nodded thoughtfully. "Who found the bodies?" "After the robbery," Mr. Westcott raised the alarm. "Said he heard shots and went to investigate." Jenkins straightened slightly, as if realizing he might be saying too much. "Why all the questions, Paine? Just curious. I provided an alibi for Miss Sullivan, as you probably heard, trying to make sense of it all." Jenkins snorted. "Yeah, I heard. Sheriff doesn't believe you, by the way, says you're sweet on her." "Is that so?" Kieran kept his tone neutral. "Well, I know what I know. Miss Sullivan was with me when those men were shot." "Then who did it?" "That's the real question, isn't it?" Kieran straightened up. "Thanks for your time, Deputy." As he left the sheriff's office, Kieran's mind was racing. The pieces were starting to fit together, but he still didn't have concrete evidence connecting Westcott to the robbery. He needed more information. His next stop was the Frontier Hotel, where he found Timothy, the desk clerk, alone at the counter. "Mr. Paine," Timothy greeted him nervously. "I didn't expect to see you back in town so soon." "Just some business to attend to," Kieran replied casually. "How are things here?" Timothy glanced around, then leaned forward. That bounty hunter questioned me for nearly an hour yesterday. I tried to be vague like you said, but he's intimidating. I appreciate you trying, Kieran said sincerely. Listen, I need some information about Edward Westcott. He's staying here, right? Timothy nodded. Room 3, best one we have. Been here nearly a month now. Does he have visitors? Business associates? A few, mostly the mayor. Timothy frowned in concentration. But there were 2 men who came to see him several times last week. Rough-looking types, not the sort Mr. Westcott usually associates with. Would you recognize them if you saw them again? Maybe. One had a scar across his nose. The other was tall with a red beard. Kieran felt a surge of hope. When's the last time you saw these men? The day before the bank robbery. They came to Mr. Westcott's room late in the evening and stayed for quite a while. Timothy's eyes widened. You don't think? I don't know what to think, Kieran cut him off. But I appreciate the information. If you see those men again, send word to me immediately. With a newfound sense of urgency, Kieran headed for the saloon. If Westcott had hired men to rob the bank and frame Violet, those men might still be in the area. And in a town like Las Animas, men with money to spend invariably ended up at the saloon. The saloon was crowded with the usual afternoon drinkers, plus several of the newly arrived mining company men. Kieran made his way to the bar where Kate was serving drinks. Well, look who's back, she greeted him with a smile. Thought you might have skipped town after crossing Cole. It'll take more than a bounty hunter to scare me off, Kieran replied, ordering a whiskey. As Kate poured, he asked casually, seen any strangers in town lately? Besides the mining company men, I mean. Kate gave him a knowing look. You're fishing for something, Kieran. What is it? Just curious if anyone unusual has been spending money freely. Maybe a man with a scar across his nose or a tall fellow with a red beard. Recognition flashed in Kate's eyes. As a matter of fact, yes. 2 men fitting that description were in here last night, drinking expensive whiskey and flashing silver dollars around. Said they'd come into some good fortune. Are they still in town? Kate nodded toward a table in the corner. Red beard is right over there. Hasn't moved since noon except to order more drinks. Kieran glanced in the direction she indicated and saw a large man with a bushy red beard slumped over a table, apparently drunk. This could be the break he needed. Thanks, Kate, he said, sliding a coin across the bar. Be careful, she warned. That one's got a mean streak when he's drinking. Kieran nodded and made his way through the crowded room to the corner table. The red-bearded man didn't look up as Kieran sat down across from him. Afternoon, Kieran greeted him. Mind if I join you? The man raised bleary eyes. Do I know you? Not yet. Name's Kieran Paine. I own the Big K Ranch north of town. So, the man took another drink from his glass. So I'm interested in how a stranger comes to town and suddenly has pockets full of silver dollars to spend. Kieran kept his voice low. Especially right after a bank robbery. The man's hand froze halfway to his mouth. Don't know what you're talking about. I think you do, Kieran leaned forward. I think you and your friend with the scarred nose had a meeting with Edward Westcott the night before the bank was robbed. I think he paid you to do a job, not just rob the bank, but make it look like someone else did it. Redbeard's face had lost some of its drunken flush. You're crazy. I never met no Westcott. Really? That's strange because the hotel clerk remembers you visiting his room. And I bet if I search your things, I'll find money with serial numbers matching what was stolen from the bank. This was a bluff. Kieran had no way to check serial numbers, but it might rattle the man enough to get information. The strategy worked. Redbeard's eyes darted nervously around the room. Keep your voice down, damn it. You don't know what you're messing with. Then tell me, Kieran suggested. What exactly am I messing with? For a moment, Kieran thought the man might talk. But then Redbeard's gaze shifted to something behind Kieran and his expression changed. "Problem here, gentlemen," came a smooth voice that Kieran recognized instantly. Edward Westcott stood beside their table, immaculately dressed as usual, but with a dangerous edge to his polished demeanor. "No problem," Kieran replied, not moving. "Just having a friendly conversation." "Mr. Brooks was just leaving, I believe," Westcott said pointedly to the red-bearded man. "He has a long journey ahead of him." Brooks, apparently the red-beard's name, scrambled to his feet. "Yes, sir. Was just going." "Wait," Kieran said, but Brooks was already hurrying toward the door. All signs of drunkenness mysteriously vanished. Westcott took the vacated seat. "Mr. Paine, I'm surprised to see you back in town so soon, especially alone." The implication was clear. Westcott had expected Kieran to be with Violet. "Had business to attend to," Kieran said, keeping his tone casual. "Interesting friend you have there." "Merely an acquaintance. A laborer my company sometimes employs for specialized tasks." Westcott straightened his cuffs. "I understand you've been asking questions about me around town." "Have I? Let's dispense with the games, shall we? You're trying to clear Miss Sullivan's name by implicating me in the bank robbery, a foolish and potentially dangerous endeavor." Kieran met Westcott's cold stare. "If you're innocent, you have nothing to worry about." "Oh, I'm not worried, Mr. Paine. Merely annoyed. You see, I have important business in Los Animas, business that will bring prosperity to this backwater town. The last thing I need is a meddlesome rancher stirring up trouble. Trouble like a bank robbery that left 2 men dead." Westcott's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Tragic, certainly, but justice will be served when Miss Sullivan is captured. And if she isn't, she will be. Harlan Cole is very good at what he does." Westcott leaned forward slightly. "But you know where she is, don't you, Mr. Paine? That's why you're here, creating a distraction while she hides on your ranch." Kieran kept his face impassive, but inwardly he was alarmed. If Westcott suspected Violet was at the Big K, it wouldn't be long before Cole figured it out too. "I have no idea where Miss Sullivan is," Kieran lied smoothly, "but I do know she's innocent. A touching belief." Westcott stood up. "Well, I've enjoyed our chat, but I have a meeting with Mayor Thornton." "Oh, and Mr. Paine." His voice hardened slightly. "I'd advise you to return to your ranch and focus on your cattle. Harlan Cole left town this morning with a very specific destination in mind. It would be a shame if you weren't there to welcome him." Cold dread settled in Kieran's stomach as Westcott walked away. The bounty hunter was headed for the Big K. Whether he deduced Violet's location on his own or been tipped off by Westcott didn't matter. Violet was in danger. Kieran needed to get back to the ranch immediately. But he also needed evidence to clear Violet's name. Without it, they'd be running forever. An idea struck him. If Brooks and his partner had been paid by Westcott to rob the bank and frame Violet, they might have kept something incriminating as insurance, a letter, a receipt, something connecting them to Westcott. And Brooks had been staying somewhere in town. "Kate," Kieran called, returning to the bar. "That red-bearded man who just left, do you know where he's been staying?" "Room above the blacksmith shop," Kate replied without hesitation. "He and his friend with the scar rented it last week." "Thanks." Kieran tossed a coin on the bar and headed for the door. He had a room to search, and not much time to do it. The room above the blacksmith shop was accessed by an external staircase at the back of the building. Kieran waited until the blacksmith was busy with a customer, then slipped up the stairs unnoticed. The door was locked, but a quick check above the doorframe revealed a key, a common hiding place in a town where many couldn't afford to lose the only key they had. Inside, The room was sparsely furnished and messy. Clothes were strewn about, empty bottles littered a small table, and the bed was unmade. Kieran quickly began searching, looking for anything that might connect Brooks and his partner to Westcott or the bank robbery. Under the mattress, he found a satchel containing a significant amount of cash, more than a laborer would typically possess. But this wasn't proof of anything. It could have come from anywhere. A more thorough search of the clothing revealed nothing useful. Kieran was about to give up when he noticed a loose floorboard near the bed. Kneeling down, he pried it up and found a small oilskin packet tucked into the space beneath. Inside were several folded papers. The first was a crude map of Las Animas, with the bank circled and notes about guard schedules. The second was a wanted poster for Violet Sullivan, dated the day before the robbery. But it was the third document that made Kieran's heart race. A letter, written on fine stationery with the Westcott Mining Company letterhead, instructing Brooks and Reed to perform the task as discussed and promising payment upon successful completion and the apprehension of the subject. It was signed with Westcott's initials. While not explicitly mentioning the bank robbery or Violet by name, the letter was damning enough when combined with the pre-dated wanted poster and the timing of events. It was the evidence Kieran needed. Carefully tucking the papers into his jacket, Kieran replaced the floorboard and left the room, locking the door behind him. Now he needed to get back to the ranch before Cole reached Violet. As Kieran mounted Diablo and rode out of town at a gallop, he calculated times in his head. Cole had left that morning, which gave him at least a few hours' head start. But Kieran knew the country better and had a faster horse. With luck, he could reach the line shack before Cole discovered it. The sun was already low in the sky, painting the landscape in gold and crimson as Kieran pushed his horse harder than he ever had before. The Big K came into view just as twilight was settling, but Kieran didn't stop at the main house. He continued north, toward the line shack, following game trails and dry creek beds to avoid leaving an obvious track. Night had fully fallen by the time he approached the small valley where the shack was located. Dismounting some distance away, Kieran continued on foot, moving silently through the darkness. As he crested the final rise, his blood ran cold. A horse was tied to a tree near the shack, a horse that wasn't Pablo's. Cole had found them. Drawing his gun, Kieran crept closer, straining to see or hear any sign of what was happening. The shack was dark, no lantern burning inside. Had Violet and Pablo fled, or were they hiding? A twig snapped behind him. Kieran whirled, gun raised, but too late. Something hard struck the back of his head, and the world went black. When Kieran regained consciousness, he was inside the line shack. His hands were tied behind his back, and his head throbbed where he'd been struck. The room was dimly lit by a single lantern set on the table. Harlan Cole sat across from him, cleaning his gun with methodical precision. Of Pablo and Violet there was no sign. "Welcome back, Mr. Paine," Cole said without looking up. "I was beginning to think I'd hit you too hard." Kieran tested his bonds discreetly. They were tight, but not impossibly so. "Where are they, your Mexican foreman, tied up in the cellar? He put up quite a fight." Cole sounded almost impressed. "As for Miss Sullivan, well, that's the interesting part. She wasn't here when I arrived." Relief washed through Kieran, followed quickly by confusion. If Violet wasn't here, where was she? "Pablo must have taken her somewhere else," Kieran said, partly to himself. "That's what I thought at first," Cole agreed, finally looking up. "But your man says she left on her own, hours before I arrived. Said she had something important to do." Cole's scarred face twisted into a smile. "Any idea what that might be, Mr. Paine?" Kieran's mind raced. Violet leaving voluntarily made no sense. She knew the danger, knew Cole was hunting her. Why would she risk capture by leaving the relative safety of the shack unless she'd somehow learned that Cole was coming and had fled to protect Pablo and himself? But where would she go? No idea, Kieran lied. But if she's gone, your business here is done. Untie me, and I won't hold a grudge about the head injury. Cole chuckled. Not quite. You see, Mr. Paine, I've been in this business a long time, and one thing I've learned is that fugitives often circle back to where they feel safe. So I'm going to wait right here, and sooner or later Miss Sullivan will return, and you're going to help me welcome her. I won't help you do anything, Kieran growled. You already have. By coming back here, you've confirmed this is where you've been hiding her. Cole holstered his gun and leaned forward. But while we wait, perhaps you'd like to explain these. He tossed the oilskin packet onto the table, the evidence Kieran had taken from Brooks and Reed's room. It must have fallen from his jacket when Cole knocked him unconscious. Interesting rating, Cole remarked. Especially that letter from Westcott. Makes a man wonder if he's hunting the right person. Kieran stared at him, reassessing the bounty hunter. If you've read that, you know Violet Sullivan is innocent. Westcott framed her. What I know, Cole replied evenly, is that Edward Westcott is a wealthy man with powerful friends, and Violet Sullivan is a woman with a troubled past who's been accused of murder. The courts will sort out who's guilty. If you take her in, she'll hang before the truth comes out. You know that. Cole shrugged. Not my concern. I'm paid to bring in fugitives, not judge them. And what if you were paid more to bring in the real criminals? Kieran suggested. Brooks and Reed are still in Las Animas. With that evidence, they could be arrested for the bank robbery and murders. And who would pay this higher bounty? You, Cole laughed. I doubt a cattle rancher has that kind of money. My ranch is worth plenty, Kieran countered. And justice should be worth something even to a man like you. Something flickered in Cole's cold eyes, perhaps the faintest hint of doubt. But before he could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats silenced them both. Cole drew his gun and moved to the window, peering out cautiously. Single rider, he murmured. Coming fast. Kieran's heart sank. Had Violet returned, riding straight into Cole's trap? But as the rider came into view in the moonlight, Kieran realized it wasn't Violet at all, it was Sheriff Wilkins. The sheriff dismounted and approached the shack, looking agitated even from a distance. Cole opened the door, gun still drawn but partially concealed by his duster. Sheriff. This is unexpected. Wilkins was out of breath and red-faced. Cole, we've got trouble. Big trouble. Reed's been found dead in town, shot in the back in an alley, and Brooks is missing, along with a significant amount of cash from Westcott's hotel room. Cole frowned. What's this got to do with my hunt for the Sullivan woman? Wilkins spotted Kieran tied to the chair and hesitated. Maybe we should talk outside. Anything you have to say can be said in front of Mr. Paine. He's involved in this up to his neck anyway. The sheriff sighed. Fine. The fact is, some evidence has surfaced suggesting Westcott might have been involved in the bank robbery. Mayor Thornton is beside himself. If it's true, the whole mining deal could fall apart. What evidence? Cole asked, though Kieran suspected he already knew. A letter from Westcott to these two men, Brooks and Reed. It was delivered to my office anonymously about 2 hours ago, along with some other papers. Kieran hid his surprise. The evidence he'd found had somehow made its way to the sheriff, but how? He'd had the papers in his jacket when Cole knocked him out. Unless. Understanding dawned on him. Violet must have been watching the shack when Cole arrived. She'd seen Kieran captured, and somehow managed to retrieve the evidence from him, perhaps when Cole dragged his unconscious body into the shack. And then, instead of running, she'd taken the evidence to town. "Where's Westcott now?" Cole asked, his voice tense. "That's the other problem. No one can find him. His hotel room's been cleared out and his horse is gone from the livery." The sheriff looked genuinely distressed. "Cole, if Westcott framed the Sullivan woman and he's now on the run, we've got a serious situation." "The town's reputation, hang the town's reputation," Kieran interrupted. "An innocent woman has been hunted like an animal while the real murderer walks free. That's your serious situation, Sheriff." Wilkins had the grace to look ashamed. "If the evidence proves true, of course we'll drop the charges against Miss Sullivan." "And the bounty," Cole asked pragmatically, "would be transferred to Westcott," the sheriff confirmed. "The town council has already approved it twice the original amount, in fact." Westcott embezzled a significant sum from the mining company funds, apparently. They're eager to see him brought to justice. Cole holstered his gun, a calculating look in his eyes. "Interesting development." He glanced at Kieran. "It seems your Miss Sullivan is braver than I gave her credit for. Or perhaps just more foolish." "Where is she now?" Kieran demanded, a new fear gripping him. If Violet had gone to Las Animas to deliver the evidence and Westcott was now missing. The sheriff shook his head. "No sign of her. I assumed she was still hiding out here." "We need to find her," Kieran said urgently. "If Westcott knows she's delivered evidence against him, she's in more danger than ever." Cole studied him for a moment, then drew a knife and cut Kieran's bonds. "I believe our business has changed, Mr. Paine. I'm now hunting Edward Westcott, not Violet Sullivan." "And I'm hunting both," Kieran said, rubbing his wrists, "but for very different reasons." "I'll help," the sheriff offered, looking like a man desperate to make amends. "The whole town will help." "If Westcott deceived us all, we don't need the whole town," Kieran cut him off. "We need to think like Westcott. If he's running, where would he go? And if he knows Violet is the one who exposed him, what would he do?" Cole's expression darkened. "He'd eliminate the witness." Kieran nodded grimly. "Let's go. First, we need to get Pablo out of that cellar." With Pablo freed and quickly briefed on the situation, the four men formed a plan. Pablo and Sheriff Wilkins would return to town to organize a search for Westcott, while Kieran and Cole, now reluctant allies, would try to find Violet before Westcott did. "If I were the Sullivan woman," Cole reasoned as they rode away from the line shack, "I'd head for the nearest larger settlement after delivering the evidence. Pueblo, maybe, or Denver." "No," Kieran said with certainty. "She wouldn't run. Not now. She'd wait to make sure the evidence was taken seriously, that Westcott was actually arrested." "Brave but foolish," Cole remarked. "Where would she wait?" Kieran thought for a moment. "There's an old trapper's cabin near the creek that runs through my property. I showed it to her when we rode to the line shack. Said it would make a good backup hiding place. Then that's where we start." They rode hard through the night, following the creek that wound its way through the northern section of the Big K. The trapper's cabin was even more isolated than the line shack, tucked into a stand of pines on a small rise above the water. As they approached, Kieran raised a hand for silence. No light showed from the cabin's single window, but that didn't mean it was empty. They dismounted and approached on foot, guns drawn at the door. Kieran listened intently. At first he heard nothing. Then faintly came the sound of breathing, ragged and uneven as if someone was injured. He tried the door. It was unlocked. Exchanging a glance with Cole, Kieran pushed it open slowly, tensed for an attack. The interior was pitch black. "Violet," Kieran called softly. A weak cough came from the corner. "Kieran." "Is that you?" Relief flooded through him at the sound of her voice, but it was short-lived. The breathing he'd heard wasn't just fatigue, she was hurt. "It's me," he confirmed, entering cautiously. "Cole is with me. He's on our side now." "How?" Nice, Violet managed, her voice strained. Could use a light. Cole struck a match, illuminating the small space. Violet was slumped in the corner, holding her side. Blood seeped between her fingers, staining her dress. God Almighty, Kieran breathed, rushing to her side. What happened? Westcott, she gasped. He found me. On the road back from town, shot me, but I got away, made it here. Kieran gently moved her hand to examine the wound. It was a clean shot through her side, painful and potentially serious, but not immediately life-threatening if they could stop the bleeding. We need to get her to a doctor, he told Cole, who was already searching the cabin for anything they could use as bandages. Too risky to move her far, Cole replied. Bleeding's bad enough as it is, and Westcott could be out there waiting. Pablo's mother was a curandera, Violet said weakly. He knows, some healing at the main house. Kieran nodded. The ranch is closer than town. Cole, can you get Pablo? Bring him here with medical supplies. The bounty hunter considered this, then nodded. I'll go. You stay with her. If Westcott shows up, kill him. He handed Kieran his spare gun. Don't hesitate. After Cole left, Kieran used his bandana to create a temporary bandage for Violet's wound. She was pale but conscious, her green eyes bright with pain and something else, determination. You delivered the evidence, he said, helping her into a more comfortable position. That was incredibly brave and incredibly foolish. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Seemed like the right thing to do. Couldn't let you face Cole alone. How did you get the papers from my jacket? Was watching the shack. Saw Cole drag you inside. Your jacket caught on a nail, papers fell out, I grabbed them while he was busy with you. She closed her eyes briefly. Rode straight to town, left the evidence with the telegraph operator. Old Mr. Jenkins knew he'd do the right thing. You could have been caught, or worse. Kieran brushed a strand of hair from her face. When I couldn't find you at the shack, I thought, you thought I'd run. She looked at him steadily despite her pain. I wouldn't, not without you. The simple declaration sent warmth spreading through Kieran's chest. He took her hand, squeezing gently. I'm going to get you out of this, Violet, I promise. I know. Her fingers tightened around his. I trust you. They fell silent for a moment, the only sound their breathing and the soft whisper of wind through the pines outside. Kieran, Violet finally said, her voice a little stronger. If something happens, nothing's going to happen, he interrupted firmly. Let me finish. She gave him a look that brooked no argument. If something happens, I want you to know that these past 2 days, they've meant more to me than I can say. Meeting you, having someone believe in me, fight for me. She took a shaky breath. No one's ever done that before. Kieran moved closer, carefully gathering her into his arms so her head rested against his chest. Nothing is going to happen to you, he repeated softly. And when this is over, we'll have plenty of time to talk about what comes next. Next. A hint of her usual spirit returned to her voice. Awfully presumptuous, Mr. Paine, maybe, he smiled against her hair. But I think we've earned the right to be a little presumptuous. Violet relaxed against him, her breathing becoming more regular. Tell me about your ranch, she said after a while. The real ranch, not just hiding places. So Kieran talked, describing the Big K in all seasons, the spring calving, summer roundups, autumn cattle drives, and peaceful winter evenings. He told her about his plans to expand, to breed better stock, to make the ranch into something that would last for generations. And as he talked, he realized he was describing a future he wanted her to be part of. They were still talking when a noise outside silenced them both. Footsteps on the porch, the door handle turning. Kieran eased Violet back against the wall and raised Cole's gun, positioning himself between her and the door. The door swung open, revealing Edward Westcott, a rifle in his hands and a cold smile on his face. How touching, he said, taking in the scene before him. The cowboy and the fugitive. I must say, Miss Sullivan, you have a talent for making men protect you. First Charles, now Mr. Paine here. Get out, Kieran said flatly, or I'll kill you where you stand. Westcott laughed. With what, that little revolver against my rifle? I think not. He stepped into the cabin, keeping the rifle trained on Kieran. Besides, I only want one thing: the letter Miss Sullivan stole from your pocket. Give it to me, and perhaps I'll let you both live. Too late, Violet said from behind Kieran. The sheriff has it by now, and all the other evidence. Westcott's composed facade cracked slightly. You're lying. The sheriff would have sent men after me already if he had proof. He has, Kieran confirmed. Cole's been sent to bring you in. The bounty on your head is twice what it was for Violet. For a moment, uncertainty flickered in Westcott's eyes. Then his expression hardened. It doesn't matter. By the time they find me, I'll be across the border in Mexico. But first, I need to ensure Miss Sullivan can't testify against me. He raised the rifle, aiming past Kieran at Violet. Kieran didn't hesitate. He fired, the sound deafening in the small cabin. Westcott staggered backward, surprise etched on his face as he looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest. Then he crumpled to the floor, the rifle falling from his hands. Moving cautiously, Kieran approached the fallen man. Westcott was still alive, but barely, blood bubbling from his lips as he tried to speak. You don't understand, he gasped. The mine, it would have made us all rich. It was never about the mine, Kieran replied. It was about power. Control. The same reason you couldn't let Violet go when she rejected you in Pueblo. Westcott's eyes widened slightly at the mention of Pueblo, then glazed over as the last breath left his body. Kieran checked for a pulse, found none, and returned to Violet's side. He's gone. She nodded, her face pale but resolute. It's over then. Almost. Kieran cradled her face in his hands. We still need to get you to a doctor. As if on cue, the sound of multiple horses approaching reached them. Moments later, Pablo burst through the door, followed by Cole and, surprisingly, Dr. Henderson from Las Animas. Violet, Pablo exclaimed, rushing to her side. We met the doctor on the road. Sheriff Wilkins sent him when he heard you were injured. While Dr. Henderson examined Violet's wound, Cole knelt beside Westcott's body, checking it professionally before looking up at Kieran. Self-defense, he asked mildly. He was going to kill her, Kieran replied. Admitted to everything before he died. Cole nodded. Good enough for me. Sheriff will want a statement, but there won't be any charges. Westcott was a wanted man. Dr. Henderson finished his examination and began cleaning Violet's wound. You're lucky, young lady. The bullet passed clean through, missing anything vital. With proper care, you should heal completely. Relief washed through Kieran. He moved to Violet's side, taking her hand as the doctor worked. Hear that? You're going to be fine. She smiled up at him, squeezing his hand. We both are. 2 weeks later, Violet stood on the porch of the main house at the Big K, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. Her side was still tender where the bullet had passed through, but Dr. Henderson had pronounced her healing well at his last visit. The door opened behind her and Kieran stepped out, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Violet and stood beside her at the railing. Beautiful evening, he remarked. It is, she agreed, sipping the hot coffee gratefully. The October air had a distinct chill as evening approached. Pablo says the last of the fall roundup is done. He's a good foreman. Got everything handled while I was playing nursemaid to a certain injured seamstress. Violet nudged him with her elbow. As I recall, it was Mrs. Alvarez who did most of the nursing. You mostly paced and worried. Kieran laughed, the sound warm in the cool air. Fair enough. They fell into a comfortable silence, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. The past 2 weeks had been a time of recovery and revelation. The full story of Westcott's scheme had emerged from the evidence Violet had delivered. He had hired Brooks and Reed to rob the bank and murder the bank manager, who had begun to question some of Westcott's financial dealings. Framing Violet had been an added bonus, eliminating someone who knew too much about his past while distracting the town from the real purpose of the robbery: stealing back incriminating documents from the bank manager's safe. Brooks had been captured trying to cross into New Mexico territory and was now awaiting trial in Las Animas. Sheriff Wilkins, eager to make amends for his rush to judgment, had officially cleared Violet's name. And to everyone's surprise, Harlan Cole had turned over his bounty payment to Violet, muttering something about professional courtesy before riding out of town in search of his next fugitive. "Telegram came today from the mining company," Kieran said, breaking the silence. "They've abandoned the project here. Too much scandal attached to it now." "I'm sorry," Violet said, knowing how much the mine would have meant to the town's economy. Kieran shrugged. "Don't be. The creek stays clean, my water rights remain undisputed, and Las Animas will grow at its own pace." "That's not such a bad outcome." Violet studied his profile in the fading light. Over these past weeks, as she'd recovered at the Big K, she and Kieran had grown closer, learning each other's stories, sharing meals and conversations, building something neither had expected when he'd helped her escape from Las Animas that first morning. "Mrs. Hollister sent word that my job at the seamstress shop is still open," she said, watching for his reaction. "If I want it." Kieran turned to face her, his expression carefully neutral. "And do you want it, I mean?" Violet set her coffee cup on the railing. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether there might be other opportunities for me. Here." She gestured to the ranch spreading out before them. Kieran's eyes softened. "I can think of several opportunities. Ranch cook, housekeeper, horse trainer, even Pablo says you have a way with Penny." Violet raised an eyebrow. "Is that all?" "Well," Kieran said thoughtfully, setting his own cup down and moving closer, "there is one more position that needs filling, been vacant for some time now." "And what position is that?" He took her hands in his. "Wife of the owner." "It's a demanding job, lots of responsibility, long hours, but it comes with certain benefits." Violet's heart skipped a beat. "What sort of benefits?" "Partnership, companionship, a home that's truly yours." His voice lowered. "Love if you want it, if I want it." Violet stepped closer, tilting her face up to his. "Kieran Paine, I think you know I already have it." His smile was brighter than the stars now appearing above them. "Is that a yes, then?" "It's a yes," she confirmed, her own smile matching his. "Though I must say, this is a rather unconventional courtship. Most women don't get shot or accused of bank robbery before receiving a proposal." "We're unconventional people," Kieran murmured, drawing her gently into his arms. "And I wouldn't have it any other way." As the last light faded from the western sky, Kieran lowered his lips to Violet's in a tender kiss that held all the promise of their future together, a future neither had imagined 2 short weeks ago, but that now stretched before them as vast and beautiful as the Colorado range that was their home. In the years that followed, the story of the bounty hunter, the wrongfully accused seamstress, and the cowboy who believed in her became something of a legend in Las Animas. The Big K Ranch prospered under Kieran and Violet Paine's stewardship, growing into one of the most successful operations in the territory. Their first child, a son they named James, was born exactly 1 year after their wedding, followed 2 years later by a daughter, Elizabeth. Las Animas itself grew and changed as the century drew to a close, but the Paines remained a constant presence, respected for their integrity and their unwavering commitment to justice. Pablo Alvarez eventually bought his own small ranch adjoining the Big K, with Kieran's enthusiastic support, and the two properties often worked together during roundups and cattle drives. And sometimes, on cool autumn evenings, Kieran and Violet would sit on that same porch where he had proposed, watching the sunset and marveling at the strange twist of fate that had brought them together: a false accusation, a bounty hunter's pursuit, and a cowboy's simple declaration, "She was with me." In the end, that act of faith had given them both what they'd spent their lives searching for: a love built on trust, forged in adversity, and destined to last a lifetime.